Hi, it's Jill Foster, designer for Faber-Castell Design Memory Craft, and today I have several tips and techniques to share with you, and I will be using the Faber-Castell Design Memory Craft Designing with Gelatos Kit to create an 8-page swatch book using lots of different treatments for the backgrounds. So to begin, here's just a peek at the items that are a part of your kit. So you will get a stencil, a bird stencil, a drip dropper, a mister, a ring for your pages, a floral stamp, foam stamp, and then you're going to get several of these 5x7 swatch books. So you have untreated canvas, chipboard, black velvet, an embossed floral, watercolor paper, a herringbone resist, wavy corrugated cardboard, and a regular cardboard, a paintbrush, 10 colors of gelatos, a tube of gesso, so here's a look at those gelatos, and they just twist up and you get this fantastic creamy color that's water soluble. You can do so many techniques with it. You also get this great technique book, so it's 22 pages with lots of wonderful projects, techniques, step-by-step directions for using your gelatos. So we're going to walk through each of the backgrounds that I've created. So this is the first one, which is the embossed floral. So to begin, I'm taking the lemon gelato and I'm just coloring directly onto that paper, and then I'm just carefully, by rubbing my finger on this, I'm blending that down into sort of the nooks and the crannies of that embossed design. And then when I switch colors, I do just wipe off my finger with a baby wipe. And now I'm using the tangerine gelato, and I'm coloring same thing directly onto the paper and then blending it with my fingertip. I do like to do the blending pretty quickly after I've put the color down onto the paper. I just find that it blends a little bit easier. So I do go color by color, and you can see where you get that nice gradient where you combine them. So I also added the bubblegum as well as the guava on the top. And now I'm taking a damp baby wipe and I'm just patting it down onto that surface. And because the gelatos are water soluble, they just really start to blend together and again get down into sort of the nooks and crannies of that embossed paper. Now I want to make sure that's dry before I go on to my next step. So I'm just taking my heat tool and drying that down. And now I'm going to take the coconut gelato, and when I color on top now, I'm not pressing too hard. I want to remain on the raised portions of that embossed look. And you get this really nice cloudy look, and it really just highlights those areas where that is raised. And you can see that here when I just get a little bit closer up. I'm just coloring on there and not pressing too hard so that it doesn't go down into the valleys. It's just staying up on the top of that embossed paper. And I'm just lightly just rubbing that with my hand, just to blend it in a little bit. And here's another look now at that final effect. And on all of these pages, all I've added is just a little bit of stamping and die cuts. You could print off your favorite quotes on the computer, cut out shapes, and they were all colored with gelatos as well. So this is the herringbone resist. So this already has a resist pattern on it. And I'm coloring now with the cotton candy gelato. And I'm just picking 3 areas. And now I'm going to use the green tea gelato and fill in the rest of that area. Because I'm going to blend this with some moisture, I can do all my coloring before I go on to the blending. So to blend this, I'm just going to take a baby wipe and I'm just kind of wipe that right on there, and they instantly blend. And you can see though where on that resist paper the herringbone pattern will show up and the color will go down into the portions that don't have the resist. So I did decide once I did that I wanted to go back and darken it up even more. And I love where the cotton candy and the green tea gelatos mix. You get that beautiful turquoise color. So I just went back over and I'm going back again then with that baby wipe to blend. Adding a little bit here and there. And now I'm just going to take another fresh baby wipe and just gently pat to remove any of the excess gelato from the resist area. And I'm just going to dry that off. And to finish this off, I just added some gesso to some areas. I just swiped it on with my hand just to give it a distressed look. Now this next technique is actually one of my favorites, and to begin I'm using the chipboard blank page, and I'm going to paint it with gesso. So your kit comes with some gesso, but I'm actually using some here just from a larger tub. I use gesso a lot. I just find that I love the way the gelatos blend when they're applied on top of the gesso. They just seem to kind of just dance and mix together beautifully on a gessoed surface. It's kind of like a primer. So I'm just painting that on. Also with this technique, whatever color you have down first is what's going to show when you use the stencil. So now I'm taking the red cherry gelato, just coloring right onto the chipboard and blending it with my finger as I go. And when I color, I'm pressing pretty hard so that it's just this really thick, rich color. And now I'm going to take the tangerine, color that up on that top corner. I do color where they overlap. If you get a little bit of another color on the tip of a different gelato, if you just color off on scratch paper, it's fine. You can see I really applied a thick layer. Now I'm just going to wipe off my hand real quick, and they come right off your hands real easily. Now I'm going to lay my stencil down. I'm going to take a baby wipe, and I'm going to actually just wipe on top of the stencil, and it's going to remove some of that gelato color. So you can see there how you get just this beautiful effect. It's very distressed, very easy to do, and you have a lot of control because you can go on just the portions of the stencil that you would like. And then I also just wanted to add that sort of distressed look around the edges. So I'm just swiping that baby wipe just right there on the edge and removing some of the gelato as well. Now for a real thick layer like this, I would spray this with just like a fixative spray so that when you're all done, none of that gelato is going to come up on your fingertips or the rest of your project. So now on this next one, I'm working on the corrugated cardboard. And we're going to start by creating a little scene on here. So I'm just going to take some gesso, and this time I'm just painting it sort of randomly onto the center, so not all the way around the edges, because I wanted to show you that the gelato color really goes on the cardboard, the chipboard, quite opaque, even though it has that brown undertone. So I've dried that off. And now I'm going to take the cotton candy gelato, and you can see where I color that on the cardboard, even where it hasn't been gessoed, you get that beautiful blue color. And I'm just going around the edges and then sort of blending it down into the area that's been gessoed. And then I'm going to use the green tea gelato here on the bottom to kind of get that sky and ground effect. And now for the next step on here, I wanted to show you also how you can stamp with your gelatos. So the kit does come with a stamp. I wanted to use a butterfly here, but you can do the same thing on the stamp that comes with the kit. So I'm just coloring right onto the stamp with the gelato. I used the red cherry and now the tangerine. And then using the mister that comes with the kit, I've just filled that with water, and I'm going to lightly mist the stamp to activate those pigments and stamp right down. And you can sort of see the texture of the cardboard showing through the stamp. And it just gets this great watercolor look. Now this is the wavy corrugate. And again, I'm going to gesso this. You don't have to do this, but I love the way, especially for this technique, we're going to be spraying the gelatos with water, and they just move very nicely on a gessoed surface. So I'm just painting that on. Now the gesso that comes with the kit is pretty thick, so you can always water that down and then paint it on, just to make it stretch a little bit longer. So once that's dry, I'm going to take my gelato and color right on top, and I'm not worried about getting it down into all of the valleys of that wavy pattern on the background. That was the bubblegum gelato. And now I'm using the metallic melon, which is this beautiful sheen. It's kind of hard to see in the video, but it's gorgeous in real life. And now I'm using the guava color down here at the bottom. And then just adding a touch of that bright bubblegum color there at the very bottom corner. Now I'm just going to take a paintbrush, and I just wanted to show you here how once you add water, it just instantly blends. But just to do this a little bit faster, I'm just spraying it with my mister and then rubbing it with my finger. And I like the control that I have when I use my finger. You could use a paintbrush as well. And I'm just continuing to spray and then blending that color. And this makes it really easy to get down into all of the grooves. Now for this next technique, I'm using the untreated canvas. And to begin, I'm just going to color right onto that untreated canvas with the gelato. I'm not worried about blending this yet. I'm just getting that color on there, getting the pigments on there. So here I'm using the red cherry. I'm going to add just a little touch of gold here and there. This is called Gold Champagne. And then I'm going to use the lemon. And then finally the tangerine. And again, doesn't look like much right now, but we're just getting those pigments onto the canvas. Now, I could take water and just blend this right out, but I want to give it sort of a creamy look. So I'm going to use the gesso, and first I'm going to just spray it with a little bit of water just to get those pigments moving. And now I'm going to take my paintbrush with the gesso, paint over the top, and you see you get this great creamy look to that background, and that those colors, they mix in there with your gesso and really start to move. So anytime, even if you were working on a palette, you could color with a gelato and mix it with gesso and get a creamy paint. And I'm just going to keep going back and adding the gesso until it's the consistency, the lightness that I'm looking for. You can add thicker layer of gesso in certain parts and then leave the color bolder in other parts. And here's another look at that once it's dry. Now for this next page, I'm working on the watercolor paper, and I wanted to show you how you can use the gelatos to color in a stamped image. So I just stamped my image by coloring onto the stamp with the Stamper's Big Brush pen with India ink so that there's no bleeding when I paint on top. I've colored with the gelato right onto the image, and using a paintbrush, I'm just blending that in, adding water and blending it in. Now I'll take the bubblegum gelato, and I'm just coloring that right in. And I wanted this to have a very artsy look, not perfect in any way. So you'll see here that I'm not being perfect to stay in the lines or get everything blended just right. But to do the blending, I like to start on the white portion, put down a layer of water, and then work into the part that I colored with the gelato. By coloring that right onto the paper, you get that bold, rich color from the gelato. And I just continue to do that. Start on the white area and then work down into the pigment, and it sort of spreads and blends throughout the entire petal. Of course, the more water you add, the lighter your color gets. And by mixing colors, like there on the center portion of that flower where I've mixed the tangerine with the bubble gum color, you get a new color. So now here's another way to paint with these. I'm just going to take my paintbrush right into the water and then pick up the color right off the tip of the gelato and then apply it onto the flower. So you have a little bit more control this way to get into those sections. These are also great to add that beautiful watercolor background look. So here I've used the cotton candy gelato, just basically scribble colored it onto the watercolor paper. And now I'm going in with my paintbrush and just water and blending that over the entire background. And I'm continuing here with that look that I was going for from the beginning, that very artsy look where you see the areas where the pigment and the water have pooled up and areas where it's lighter and darker. And then I decided to add some gesso right on top of this. So I'm just doing it with my finger, but you could absolutely do this with a paintbrush as well. And I'm just swiping that right on top to areas of the background, some of it going over the flower. This is a great way. I kind of liked how this turned out. It almost looks like clouds. It would be fun to do for like a landscape or a scenery look as well. The blue, the cotton candy gelato with the white gesso. And then here's another thing I like to do when I've painted in an image. I'm just putting the paintbrush in water, coloring it directly on the tip of the gelato, and then by kind of hitting that paintbrush on my finger, I get some fun splatters. So I did that with the red cherry and now with the tangerine. And here's a look at that up close. Now, something else that's fun to do with the gelatos is to add them onto a dark color. So you could do that on a cardstock. Here we're doing it on the black velvet. And I'm just simply using a stencil, the cotton candy gelato, coloring onto those holes of the stencil. And the pigment in the gelato really pops against the dark black velvet. So I'll just continue to color those in, sort of randomly. I'm not doing the entire stencil. And when I lift up there, you can see how bright and bold that is. So then I'll want to, of course, clean off the stencil before I switch to a new color. So I used cotton candy, and now I'm going to use green tea. I'm just deciding there exactly where I want to put that stencil. And I'm going to color through the center. Now with all of these pieces, again, like I said, I just embellish them using die cuts and a little bit of stamping. You could also, if you're a card maker or a scrapbooker, you could actually cut these pieces apart and use them on your cards or your scrapbook pages. You could add photos and make a mini book. It's really endless, the possibilities. And to finish this off here, I'm just coloring with that coconut gelato just to add a touch of white around the edges. And you can see how bold that is even on top of the dark black velvet. And here's another look at that close-up. Thank you so much for watching. Here's a look at the swatch book together. I hope you're inspired to get out your gelatos and give a few of these techniques a try.